Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're a brand new subscriber or a brand new viewer. My name is Kyle. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is hitting theaters on June 30th, and once a month I am talking about one Indiana Jones film leading up to its release, and for the month of April we are talking about 1984's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This was once again directed by Steven Spielberg, with the story by George Lucas and William Hayek, and starring once again Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. This review will contain heavy spoilers. I'll be talking about the entire film, story, and characters, so if you have yet to see this film, please go watch it and come back to this review. When I discussed Raiders last month, I said the issue with talking about it is one of the most influential and popular films ever made, period. It is unanimously beloved by fans and critics alike. Temple of Doom does not have that same recognition. In fact, as a kid, this was viewed as the bad Indiana Jones from my parents. For my mother, Raiders is one of her favorite movies. I dare say it's in her top 5 favorite films of all time. I think Temple is in her top 5 least favorite movies. So it was not viewed in a positive way by my family. And as such, when I first saw the film as a kid, I believe I was 8 when I first watched it, I wasn't really a fan of it. I didn't watch it as much as Raiders or Last Crusade, or hell, I think even as much as Kingdom did when it came out in theaters and on DVD. This was the movie I saw the least. But as I kept getting older, I started to appreciate the movie more. And it's to the point where sitting here today, I will say that I love Temple of Doom. I really think it's a fantastic film and a great addition to this franchise. And what I like is, right off the bat, it's a prequel. It's set in 1935. And I also like that its opening is in a way similar to Raiders. Indiana Jones is on a mission, and as such, he gets cornered, shot at, and gets out of the situation just at the last second. However, Spielberg's attempt at always trying to make a James Bond movie is exemplified here with Indiana Jones wearing a white tux, just like Sean Connery did in Goldfinger. We also get introduced to Willie Scott, played by future wife of Steven Spielberg, Kate Capshaw. We'll definitely talk about her performance as we get on throughout this review. But we also get introduced to the villainous Lao She. I think this guy is really cool, sinister. He owns this very special club with a very interesting name.
Hello there.
It's immediately here why I have to praise Douglas Slocum. He's the cinematographer for the film. He also did the cinematography for Raiders and Last Crusade, respectively. The use of anamorphic lenses here is amazing. I love the widescreen of this film. I love how much dedication they put into the rule of thirds here. This was really a privilege back then to acquire those lenses. You had to acquire them back then. And of course you were shooting on film, so it's not like an SD card. So they really had to make sure that the framing and staging and blocking of these sequences was efficient, and they did it seamlessly. And the fact that they did it seamlessly means that it was very complicated to do. The opening action sequence is a lot of fun. One of my favorite shots ever is him taking a flaming kebab and killing one of the assailants by stabbing him with it. This movie definitely pushed the envelope, and we'll get to that in just a minute. The other henchman, who is one of the most trigger-happy people I've ever seen in a film, is firing at the gong repeatedly. Indian Willie crashed through the window. They crash land into the hood of the car, and this is where we get introduced to Short Round, played by Academy Award-winning actor Ke Huy Quan. That feels amazing to say. And I just got to pause for a second and just mention, it is amazing that he is now an Oscar-winning actor, and he got handed the Best Picture Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once by Harrison Ford. That is one of those moments that is just so unreal. It's amazing it happened, and it's definitely my favorite moment of any Oscars I've ever seen in my life. It's just amazing. I have always loved the character of Short Round. I think he's a great addition and a fantastic sidekick to Indiana Jones. He's a lot of fun. His voice is definitely very high-pitched, but he's a kid. I don't really have a problem with that. I've always thought he was great. I didn't know this until I got older, but that man that gives them the plane tickets is played by Dan Aykroyd, who recently worked with Spielberg in 1941. Not one of Spielberg's greatest films, but I think that's a pretty interesting little cameo he had there. And the plot kicks in once they raft out of the plane that crashes into a snowy mountain, which they in no way should have survived. This is definitely where the fantastical element of this movie begins. They end up venturing into this dying village in India, where Indiana Jones is asked to visit Pankot Palace, because that's where they believe that not only is their sacred stone that protects the village is located, but that there is a secret underground cult that is there as well. The biggest praise I'm going to give to Temple of Doom, and I think concurrently is the reason why people either hate it or dislike it, is the fact that it does the opposite of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders to me is a very upbeat and joyous movie with dark moments. Temple of Doom is a very dark and sinister film that has some comedic and upbeat moments in it. It dares to be ambitious and more fantastical because the object of pursuit in this film is not the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail. They're not these heavily popular and religious artifacts. It is a sacred stone that protects a village. So you have to make it a bit more mystical. And I think George Lucas was wise to make this a prequel. It's interesting, George Lucas prequels, and that's not the last time we'll ever hear those words and those sentences uttered. But I like the fact that it's a prequel here because the character of Indiana Jones, as he states in the film, is after fortune and glory with this.
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
He isn't portrayed in the same way he is in Raiders or The Last Crusade or even Kingdom. However, what he goes through in this movie drastically changes the perspective of the character for Raiders and Last Crusade. I found out from an interview with Ke Huy Quan last year that they went to Sri Lanka to film parts of this movie, and I really appreciate them for going to a foreign exotic location because it really adds authenticity to the adventure in the movie. And of course, you can't review an Indiana Jones movie without talking about John Williams. His score for this movie is absolutely phenomenal. You get this absolute sense of wonder, mystique, darkness, despair, savagery. All of that is included in this film. And in a lot of ways, I like the score even more than Raiders. It's difficult to top a movie like Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously, in any aspect, but the music definitely has a different mystical kind of feel to it. Every Indiana Jones movie has a sequence or a shot that just lingers on your mind and is one of the reasons why you just get excited about filmmaking. And it's interesting to use the word exciting because when Indiana Jones comes up towards the entrance of Pankot and he discovers the bloody fingers, there is a shot of him coming up to the camera with an extreme close-up of his sweaty as hell face. It is phenomenal because you are experiencing this up-close fear that the character is feeling because he's never seen anything like this before, and we as the audience have not seen anything like this before. I can only imagine what people must have felt like seeing this back in 1984. It must have been exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I love the above-ground Pankot set. It's fantastic. I love the use of the anamorphic lenses, of course, especially when they introduce the Maharaja. You get this amazing shot with the Dana Dolly. It is beautiful. It's then followed by the dinner sequence. I think everyone that tuned into this review was wondering if I was going to mention that. Of course, you got to talk about that. It is truly grotesque and creepy, but it is hilarious at the same time, especially watching Short Round spit his gum out. I just love that shot. Now, a character that I never really paid attention to until this rewatch was the British captain, and I realized that that is the same actor who played Grady in The Shining. I was listening to his voice and I thought, I know him from somewhere. The bigger question is he there to inspect or is he there to do some correcting? It was Roger Ebert who said this during his review of Temple, and that is, it feels like it's really a two-act movie. First half is Indiana Jones crash landing and investigating Pankot, and the second half is the underground cult with the mine chase and all the action. And I think that's a great way to describe this movie. I feel like the second half really starts with this amazing shot of them walking through this cave entrance. I think it's a great shot, even though it's definitely shot on a blue screen. It does look very mystical and dark, like they're about to enter something that they are never going to forget. And that is absolutely true with The Lair. It is an amazing set. I love the set design in this film. The production design was done by Elliot Scott. He would go on to do the production design for Labyrinth and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, so he had a hell of a career during the 80s. It's here we get introduced to the villainous Mola, played by Amrish Puri. I hope that's how you pronounce his name. If there's any fellow Indian viewers watching this, I do apologize if I butchered his name, because he is one of their most renowned villainous actors. He is so good in this movie. He has two of my favorite lines of the film, without question.
You don't believe me? You will, Dr. Jones.
Drop them, Dr. Jones! They will be found! You won't!
The boldness or the balls of the filmmakers for what they did in this scene, because what they do here essentially created another rating for how to rate movies forever. This scene definitely changed the whole PG rate. It involves a man sticking his hand into another man's chest, ripping his heart out, saying, "I'll take that," as his body gets lowered into a pit of flames, and as his body begins to flame up, the heart explodes in Mola hand. Now, for me, I think that's awesome. However, there were a lot of other people that were absolutely terrified and were probably pissing their pants, which is funny because there were a lot of movies I saw as a kid that weren't classified as horror movies that scared me. This never scared me. I always thought it was cool. I mean, it's demented, of course, but the special effects in this scene are phenomenal. And if you thought that was dark, next up we have enslaved children, a brutal as hell whipping scene, and a liquid that Indy consumes that turns him evil. Yeah, this movie definitely veers into more camp territory, which to me is not necessarily a bad thing, but I do understand where a lot of the criticisms of this movie are placed. I do get that. It just goes in this very bonkers and bizarre direction, but I'm all for that. I like it when movies take a turn and give you this adrenaline rush where you're just wondering what's going to happen next from scene to scene. But of course, we know he's eventually going to get snapped out of turning evil, and that's by being burnt by Short Round. Again, it's odd how these rules work in a lot of these older films or these classic films, but they feel very simple. Like, you don't really need to explain it. It just happens and we go on. One thing I absolutely love is that little wink he gives to Short Round. I think that's just fantastic. And honestly, after watching the Oscars last month, the moment where these two characters hug each other, it just hits at a different emotional level to me. Now that he's no longer evil, of course, the next scene involves all the children being saved, and we get what is, hands down, my favorite shot of Indiana Jones in the entire franchise. A fight scene ensues with returning cast member Pat Roach. He was the big guy that Indy fought during the biplane scene in Raiders. And this scene, to me, has a moment that is just very silly, where he takes a mallet, throws it, and all of a sudden a guy just gets bonked on the face with it. It's very odd, and it definitely is where some of the criticisms for me start to kind of kick in. I do think that Spielberg went a bit too far with trying to make these comedic scenes, and the even bigger problem is the continuity in that scene makes no sense. And as a matter of fact, there are a lot of continuity errors in this movie, and there's definitely a couple I'm going to show that, unfortunately, if you haven't noticed these before, these are the kind of things where you cannot unsee them once you see them. And just like with Raiders, Pat Roach's character has to die in an extremely graphic and gory manner. However, after that, the action is definitely more upbeat and joyous, like Raiders is. I definitely love the escape where he grabs the chain and we get this amazing shot of him coming down. It's handheld. It's really, really cool. And then we get to the infamous minecart chase. I love this sequence. It was supposed to be in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but because of budgetary concerns and because it didn't really make sense in the context of the story, they decided to put it here, and thank goodness they did, because this is a whirlwind of a scene. It definitely feels like you are on a roller coaster. And this scene here presents the only moment where Willie Scott is useful in the entire motion picture. Now, I definitely have to be honest here when I state that I think the special effects are the worst of the trilogy here. I love the ambition in terms of the story. They really wanted to tell something different, darker, and more sinister. They didn't want to go in the same direction that Raiders did, and I respect that. But that ambition, I think, got a little bit too far-fetched with some of the special effects. Definitely the shot where they're hiding on the side of the rocks when the water comes out, that is an example of a horrible effect. And I think even on DVD it didn't look good, but every time they upscale the movie, it just looks worse and worse. It's a horrible effect because it is so clear that they are not there and they're trying to be superimposed there. The bridge scene is really fun when it collapses, but unfortunately, a lot of the blue screen effects just don't hold up. And I'm not sure if they looked good in 1984, but definitely watching it today and absolutely when they try to upscale it, it just looks more noticeable that they are definitely on a set suspended in front of a big blue screen. What's most incredible about the scene is John Williams' music, especially when they were trying to save the children. I can't play any of the music because I get slammed with copyright almost immediately, but definitely the music in this scene just fuels all of the tension and adventure. And I love the moment where Indy and Mola are trying to fight over the bag, and all of a sudden there's a hole that rips and it burns. I think that effect is spectacular. All of the practical effects in the movie, I think, are really impressive. They're very spectacular, as well as the matte paintings. I didn't really give much attention to that earlier, but I think the matte artists here did a spectacular job. I'm sure they're the same people that did them for the Star Wars trilogy, but they really look impressive here. Sadly, I can't give the same praise to Mola Ram's death. It just looks ridiculous. I've always thought it was very comical, but it's basically here where the movie ends. The stones return to the village, there's life being given, the children return, Indy and Willie have a kiss, and that concludes the film. Now, I did want to mention something I was a bit critical about, and that is the character of Willie Scott, played by Kate Capshaw. Now, I think Kate Capshaw is a very attractive actress. She's definitely beautiful. They definitely show that in this movie, and that's fine. But the character, I think when Stephen King described his criticism towards the character of Wendy in The Shining, played by Shelley Duvall, he exclaimed that she's there to basically just scream and be stupid. And that's how I feel about the character in this film. And as such, I just don't buy the chemistry that she is supposed to have with Harrison Ford. I just don't see it. With someone like Indiana Jones, he's really interested in somebody that is intelligent and can hold their own, which is basically Marion. And with them trying to do the polar opposite of Raiders, they basically did that with the character. Instead of her being very feisty and independent, this woman is just a money-grabbing ditz who just screams all the time and just is there to be stupid. And it definitely bogs down the movie to me. I love Temple of Doom. I really have grown into it as a fan of course, the franchise, but as a fan of the movie itself. I think it is a lot of fun, but it is very dark, and I do understand if you are somebody that dislikes the film. Like I said at the beginning, my family hates it. They're not a fan of it at all. So I am definitely alone in terms of my love for the movie. It definitely has its problems, but I definitely think that it has so much merit and ambition with it trying to be a different film. And sometimes that's enough to warrant a very, very high grade, which I am going to give this film. I'm going to give Temple of Doom an A. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on Temple of Doom. Please leave me a comment in the comment section below. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. The links to my social media pages, as well as my website, kjgpictures.com, are in the description box below. Next time, in May, we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I'm very excited to talk about that film. Definitely can't wait to share it with you guys. Thank you so much as always for watching, and stay tuned.